We're in Moscow tonight. We're here to interview the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. We'll be doing that soon. There are risks to conducting an interview like this, obviously, so we thought about it carefully over many months. Here's why we're doing it. First, because it's our job. We're in journalism. Our duty is to inform people. 2 years into a war that's reshaping the entire world, most Americans are not informed.
This interview with Russian President Vladimir Putin is leading up to be the biggest left-wing triggering in recent history. It's not due to Putin being interviewed. If left-leaning media conducted the meeting, they would be held in high regard. There was nothing Tucker could have done, or asked differently, to even draw a sliver of thought from the left. Their minds already locked within their echo chambers of groupthink, seeking and only accepting information that confirms and supports their beliefs, refusing to hear any opposing view without intent to find a narrative to undermine or ridicule. This is the root cause to the distorted perception of reality and complete unwillingness to consider alternative perspectives. The liberals use democracy as reasoning for every argument. This is repeated in every comment board pertaining to unlimited financial and weapons support to Ukraine. Within the same argument of democracy, they openly call for conservatives to be removed. They call for Tucker to be charged for treason, saying he needs banned from the US, that he's a traitor. They're cheering to have Trump removed from ballots. They want him imprisoned on any charge that may stick. How can such a large group be willing to forego the Constitution and the rights it's meant to protect? They call for the silence and imprisonment of opposition, call to defund the police, cheer for war, while virtue signaling across social media as they sit within the safety of their homes, encouraging more and more death and destruction. For democracy, of course.
The audio clip of a woman and man, said to be Newland and Pyatt, here's them discussing strategies to work with the three main opposition figures.
I don't think Cleach should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
In terms of him not going into the government, just let him sort of stay out and do his political homework and stuff. I'm just thinking in terms of sort of the process moving ahead, we want to keep the moderate Democrats together. The problem is going to be Tony Book and his guys. And, you know, I'm sure that's part of what Yanukovych is calculating on all of this.
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, you know, what he needs is Cleach and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week, you know. I just think Cleach going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Violence returned to the streets of Kiev again last Tuesday when police and the Euromaidan protesters clashed outside the Ukrainian parliament. The police chased protesters back into Independence Square and attempted to clear it, but were unsuccessful.
Но не у всех это не заложено в основе этой организации, это у некоторых людей есть.
А у вас?
У меня лично есть.
В смысле? Объясните.
Ну, мне как бы нравится эта идея единой нации. Я хочу, чтобы нация была единая, чтобы один народ, одна страна, одна нация.
А это подразумевается что? Что?
Ну, как бы, чтобы чистая нация. Ну, не то, что там, как бы у Гитлера как было. Ну, в своем роде немножко, ну, маленько, но было, чтобы своя нация.
What about the East, I asked? What about Crimea, where many Ukrainians feel close historical ties to Russia?
Кому нравится Россия, пусть едут в Россию. Украина только для украинцев.
Nuland's involvement is argued, some saying it was about supporting Ukraine and democracy, freeing them from Russian influence. Others say it was a coup, set in place to overthrow a democratically elected official. Either way, top-ranking U.S. officials were in Ukraine, supporting those trying to overthrow the elected government. Nuland was there to influence on behalf of U.S. interests. What about the interests of the EU?
And, the EU.
Words of a true democracy. The problem with the left is everything is respun or denied outright. This overthrow of government is celebrated and named the Revolution of Dignity. In Canada, the Freedom Convoy was labeled a far-right fringe movement. Deemed so dangerous, the government invoked the Emergency Act. January 6th in the U.S. is labeled the Capitol attack, or the insurrection, the worst attack on America since 9/11. The protesters are called rioters and insurrectionists. A vast mob led by Trump to overthrow election results, therefore a direct attack on democracy. Black Lives Matter. The riots, looting, violence, and arson is constantly referred to as protesters.
I said I'm tired of being peaceful and tired of being calm. They've been going to war on us for over 400 years, so I ain't peaceful. I ain't no protester. I'm violent.
BLM protests were spun as justified, a retaliation against racial targeting by the police. They raised $90 million in 2020. The protests are largely reported as mostly peaceful, while understating or not reporting on the death, injuries, damages, and looting costs. The Democrats like to give the illusion of being the leaders in racial equality and civil rights. The government wanted Viktor Yanukovych removed from power in Ukraine. It didn't matter the ideology behind it. The violence and destruction was of no matter, as long a pro-Western, anti-Russian power was put in place. Stating, it wasn't a coup, but people rising for democracy. The Freedom Convoy and Jan 6th protests were far less violent and destructive in contrast, but both were targeted as anti-democratic, a direct attack on democracy. Media and the left see them as nothing but white supremacists and far-right. In the U.S., MAGA is pretty much a term used by the left to describe extremists. The government of Canada is now using Trump and MAGA in the same fashion when talking about conservatives. A strong country has no purpose for division. Think about that. So what does Tucker discuss? How does he view things? He has a very strong stance that government needs to put America first. He openly points out fractures that are developing within the country and calls for reform to fix them. He doesn't want policy encouraging and promoting war. He promotes the protection of children and believes in maintaining basic traditional values. Nothing points to him being a traitor or working for Putin. We can't discuss certain shots, effectiveness, or side effects. If you do, you're an anti-vaxxer. We can't question constant weapons supplies to Ukraine. Are you a Putin apologist? Ask about the state of the economy, and they will say we've never had it so good. Hunter's laptop still isn't talked about. The whole thing was spun a Russian disinformation. Social media limited or blocked dissenting views. Every opinion that lies outside the narrative is conspiracy theory. The Democrats are telling voters democracy will fall if Republicans are elected. This isn't typical party-to-party smack talk. This is actually dangerous, and lefty media just runs with it. So why is Tucker's interview so triggering? Because the lies are unraveling. We've all been living in a fog, offered small openings of clarity, and we're lucky to have a handful of people watching and reporting on things most don't see. The left aren't crusaders of truth, protecting us from mis- and disinformation. They are trying to bury their lies and maintain power. The ones in power are the ones pulling the countries into dictatorship. Lefty media. Mocking Tucker. He's not a journalist. He reports on his own accord. Whereas mainstream are the talking heads of their handlers, unable to voice their own view under threat of being cancelled. If there was no political party to mindlessly cheer for, would people see how bad things are now? What if there was no media working hand in hand, but instead holding every policy to account? The division needs to stop. We need to all stand together for what's best for our countries, end the corruption, end the corporate handouts that instill policies that hurt us. When a political party needs to tell us what democracy is during every public address, are they trying to convince us or themselves?